The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street as Agent Richardson adjusted his tie in the rear-view mirror. 20 years of dedicated service to the nation's highest office had earned him a reputation for unwavering professionalism and exceptional instincts. Today was supposed to be a routine security assessment for an upcoming diplomatic visit, but fate had other plans. As he pulled his government-issued black SUV into the parking lot of a local coffee shop, he noticed 2 patrol cars slowly circling the area. Nothing unusual about that, he thought, reaching for his credentials that hung around his neck. In his line of work, crossing paths with local law enforcement was a regular occurrence. The aroma of fresh coffee beckoned him inside. He had just finished placing his order when the shop's bell chimed, and heavy footsteps approached from behind. "Sir, we need you to step outside," a stern voice commanded. Agent Richardson turned to face 2 officers, their hands resting cautiously on their holsters. "Of course, officers," he replied calmly, reaching for his Secret Service credentials. "I'm a federal agent conducting." Before he could finish, one officer cut him off. "Hands where we can see them." The coffee shop fell silent, customers freezing mid-sip as the scene unfolded. Agent Richardson's training kicked in. Stay calm. De-escalate. "Officers, I'm reaching for my federal credentials," he explained, his voice steady despite the tension crackling through the air. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears as one officer moved to grab his arm. The next few moments played out in slow motion. His credentials clattered to the floor, the familiar eagle emblem catching the morning light. Coffee shop patrons watched in stunned silence as the veteran Secret Service agent was pushed against a wall, his years of distinguished service seemingly meaningless in that moment. "There's been a mistake," a young barista called out, phone in hand, already recording. "He showed me his badge when he paid." But her voice was drowned out by the sound of handcuffs clicking into place. As Agent Richardson was led outside, he maintained his composure, knowing that every word and action would be scrutinized later. Through the window, curious onlookers began gathering, phones raised, capturing what would soon become a viral moment that would spark a national conversation. In the back of the patrol car, Agent Richardson took slow, measured breaths. This wasn't his first encounter with prejudice, but it was perhaps the most public. As a senior member of the Presidential Protective Division, he'd faced countless high-stakes situations, but none quite like this. The irony wasn't lost on him, from protecting the nation's leaders to being detained outside a coffee shop. Little did those officers know that their actions would set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate through their department, the Secret Service, and eventually, the entire nation. As the patrol car pulled away from the curb, Agent Richardson's mind was already racing ahead, not with anger or revenge, but with determination to turn this incident into an opportunity for meaningful change. The coffee shop video was already making its way through social media channels, and within hours, it would catch the attention of not just local news outlets, but the highest offices in Washington. This wasn't just about one agent's dignity. It was about confronting a systemic issue that had plagued law enforcement for far too long. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, neither the officers nor Agent Richardson could have predicted how this encounter would transform their lives and their community in the days to come. This was only the beginning of a story that would challenge perceptions, test loyalties, and ultimately lead to an unexpected resolution that would leave an indelible mark on everyone involved. Within hours of Agent Richardson's detention, the coffee shop video had exploded across social media platforms. The crystal-clear footage showed the veteran agent's professional demeanor even as he was being handcuffed, and his repeated attempts to identify himself as a federal officer. The hashtag Secret Service while Brown began trending, drawing attention from civil rights activists, law enforcement officials, and politicians alike. Back at the police station, the atmosphere shifted dramatically when the station captain burst into the holding area, his face ashen. "Get those cuffs off him now," he ordered, having just received a call from the Secret Service field office. The same officers who had been so aggressive earlier now scrambled to comply, their earlier confidence replaced by growing unease. Agent Richardson rolled his shoulders as he was released, maintaining the same calm demeanor he'd shown throughout the ordeal. "I'd like to make a phone call," he stated simply, straightening his jacket. The captain personally escorted him to his office, apologizing profusely along the way. But Agent Richardson wasn't interested in apologies, he was focused on something bigger. In Washington, D.C., the Secret Service director was already in emergency meetings with top brass. The incident had escalated beyond a simple case of mistaken identity. It had become a spotlight on the intersection of law enforcement, race, and power in America. The director knew that their response would be crucial. This wasn't just about protecting their agent's reputation, but about addressing a systemic issue that had now landed squarely on their doorstep. Meanwhile, the local police department was facing its own crisis. Internal Affairs launched an immediate investigation, pulling body camera footage and interviewing witnesses from the coffee shop. The officers involved were placed on administrative leave, standard procedure that did little to quell the growing public outrage. The coffee shop barista's video had been shared millions of times, with each repost adding to the mounting pressure for accountability. News vans began appearing outside the police station, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. Reporters rushed to piece together Agent Richardson's background, his exemplary service record, his multiple commendations, the lives he'd saved during his career. By evening, the story had reached the White House. Agent Richardson had served on protective details for 2 presidents, and his reputation within the Secret Service was impeccable. The White House press secretary was already fielding questions about the incident, promising a full investigation while emphasizing the administration's commitment to addressing bias in law enforcement. Local community leaders began organizing a peaceful demonstration outside the police station. But what surprised many was Agent Richardson's response to the growing controversy. Instead of calling for the officer's termination or pursuing immediate legal action, he requested a meeting with the police department's leadership and the officers involved. "This isn't about punishment," he explained to his superiors. "It's about transformation." His years of experience in protection had taught him that sustainable change required more than just punitive measures. It required understanding, education, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The media was hungry for details about the upcoming meeting. Speculation ran wild about what would happen when Agent Richardson came face to face with the officers who had detained him. Some expected fireworks, others predicted legal threats. None anticipated the approach that Agent Richardson was quietly planning. As night fell over the city, tensions continued to mount. Social media was ablaze with opinions, with the video being analyzed frame by frame. Security experts pointed out the officers' procedural violations, while civil rights attorneys highlighted the broader implications of the incident. But through it all, Agent Richardson maintained his silence, preparing for what he knew would be one of the most important conversations of his career. In their homes, the officers involved watched the story unfold on their TV screens, their families trying to process what had happened. They had responded to a "suspicious person" call from a nearby business, but nothing in their training had prepared them for the fallout of detaining a Secret Service agent. Their actions, viewed through the unforgiving lens of viral video, were being dissected by millions. As Part 2 drew to a close, the stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everyone's expectations. Agent Richardson's planned meeting wasn't just about addressing one incident, it was about seizing an opportunity to bridge the gap between different worlds of law enforcement, to turn a moment of conflict into a catalyst for change. The question on everyone's mind was, could one man's dignity and determination transform a community's understanding of justice and respect? The community center's conference room was an unlikely setting for what many considered a historic meeting. Agent Richardson arrived early, reviewing his notes one final time. The room had been chosen carefully, neutral ground, away from both the police station and federal buildings. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long rectangles of sunshine across the polished table. Outside, protesters held signs and news crews jostled for position, but inside, a different kind of tension filled the air. The police chief entered first, followed by the two officers involved in the incident. Their faces showed the strain of sleepless nights and public scrutiny. Behind them came representatives from the police union, the city council, and the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Agent Richardson stood as they entered, his posture relaxed but professional. The officers hesitated briefly at the door, clearly uncomfortable. They had expected anger, demands, and threats of legal action. Instead, they found themselves face to face with a man whose calm demeanor seemed at odds with the chaos their actions had unleashed. "Please, sit down," Agent Richardson gestured to the chairs. "We have a lot to discuss, but first, I want you to understand something. I'm not here to end your careers." The surprise on their faces was evident. The younger officer's shoulders relaxed slightly, while his senior partner remained tense, hands clasped tightly on the table. What followed was unlike anything the observers had expected. Agent Richardson began by sharing stories from his 20 years of service, not just the triumphs, but the challenges. He spoke about the delicate balance of authority and responsibility, about split-second decisions that could mean life or death. "I've been where you are," he explained, leaning forward. "I've had to make quick judgments under pressure. But what happened at that coffee shop wasn't just about quick judgment. It was about something deeper." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The senior officer, who had maintained his rigid posture throughout, finally spoke. His voice was hoarse with emotion. "We received a call about suspicious activity. You matched the description." He trailed off, realizing how hollow the explanation sounded. "A black man in a suit, checking his phone near a bank," Agent Richardson finished for him. "Tell me, in your years of service, how many times have you responded to calls like that? And how many times were those calls justified?" The silence that followed was profound. The younger officer looked down at his hands, then raised his eyes to meet Agent Richardson's gaze. "I've never had training like this," he admitted quietly. "At the academy, they teach us procedures, protocols. But this is different." Agent Richardson nodded, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out a folder containing statistics, studies, and real-world examples of bias in law enforcement. But more importantly, it contained solutions, training programs, community engagement initiatives, and success stories from departments that had made real progress. "What happened to me made headlines because of my position," he continued. "But similar incidents happen every day to doctors, lawyers, teachers, ordinary citizens who don't have the shield of a federal badge to protect them. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" The police chief leaned forward, intrigued by the direction of the conversation. This wasn't the confrontational meeting they had prepared for. Instead, it was evolving into something more constructive, a blueprint for change. As the morning wore on, the atmosphere in the room transformed. The initial tension gave way to genuine dialogue. The officers shared their own experiences, their fears, and their desire to serve their community better. Agent Richardson listened intently, asking questions that challenged assumptions while acknowledging the complexities of modern policing. "I'm proposing a pilot program," he announced, spreading out a detailed proposal. "Joint training sessions between local law enforcement and federal agents, focusing on bias recognition and de-escalation techniques. But more than that, I want to establish regular community dialogues where officers can hear directly from the citizens they serve." The police union representative shifted uncomfortably. "That's going to require resources, time." He began, but the police chief cut him off. "We'll find the resources," she stated firmly. "What's the alternative? Waiting for the next incident to make headlines?" As the meeting drew to a close, Agent Richardson had one final surprise. He pulled out his phone and played a voicemail, a message from the president himself, expressing not just concern about the incident, but support for using it as a catalyst for meaningful reform. The younger officer, who had been quiet for much of the meeting, suddenly spoke up. "When I joined the force, I wanted to make a difference. Maybe this is how we start." His partner nodded slowly, years of ingrained defensiveness beginning to crack. As they prepared to leave, Agent Richardson shook hands with each person in the room. "This isn't the end," he reminded them. "It's just the beginning of a longer conversation." Outside, the crowd of reporters waited eagerly for statements, but the real story, the quiet revolution beginning in that conference room, would take longer to tell. The weeks following the historic meeting brought unprecedented changes to the police department. The community center, once a simple gathering place, had transformed into a hub of activity. Agent Richardson's pilot program was taking shape, drawing attention from law enforcement agencies across the country. On a crisp morning, 30 police officers filed into the training room, including the 2 officers from the coffee shop incident. The atmosphere was different now, less defensive, more open to change. At the front of the room, Agent Richardson stood alongside a diverse team of instructors, federal agents, community leaders, and civil rights experts. "Today, we're not just learning new procedures," Agent Richardson began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "We're learning to see through different eyes." The training session that followed was unlike anything the officers had experienced. Through virtual reality simulations, they experienced scenarios from both sides, as law enforcement and as civilians being approached by police. One simulation particularly struck home. Officers found themselves in the role of a successful professional being stopped while going about their daily business. The feeling of helplessness, the frustration of not being believed, the fear, it was eye-opening. The younger officer from the coffee shop incident removed his VR headset, visibly moved. "I never understood," he admitted to the room. "Not really." Meanwhile, the community engagement portion of the program was gaining momentum. Weekly forums brought officers face-to-face with local residents in informal settings. Coffee shops, including the one where the incident occurred, hosted "Coffee with Cops" events. The conversations weren't always easy, but they were real. The senior officer who had been involved in Agent Richardson's detention found himself at one such event, sitting across from a local high school principal. "I've been on the force for 15 years, he shared, stirring his coffee. "But these past few weeks have taught me more than all those years combined." The media coverage shifted too. Local news stations that had initially focused on the controversy now reported on the innovative training methods. National outlets picked up the story, highlighting how one incident was catalyzing change across the law enforcement community. Agent Richardson's approach was being hailed as a model for departments nationwide. Behind the scenes, the changes went deeper. The department revised its dispatch protocols, implementing new questions to better assess situations before officers responded. Bias recognition training became mandatory, not just a one-time session but an ongoing program. Body camera footage was now regularly reviewed not just for incidents, but as a training tool. The coffee shop where it all began had become a symbol of transformation. The young barista who had recorded the initial incident was now part of the Community Advisory Board, bringing a youth perspective to police-community relations. "It's strange," she reflected during one meeting. "Something that started so wrong has led to so much right." Agent Richardson's superiors at the Secret Service took notice. What began as a local initiative was scaling up. Other federal agencies expressed interest in implementing similar programs. The Department of Justice began studying the model for potential nationwide adoption. The 2 officers involved in the original incident underwent the most visible transformation. The younger officer became a vocal advocate for change within the department, mentoring new recruits about the importance of checking biases. His senior partner, initially the more resistant of the 2, now led sensitivity training sessions, sharing his own journey from skepticism to understanding. During one particularly powerful training session, he stood before his colleagues, voice thick with emotion. "I thought being a good cop meant being tough, being suspicious. Now I understand that true strength lies in being able to admit when we're wrong and being willing to change." The program's success attracted attention from police departments in neighboring cities. Agent Richardson found himself traveling to share the model, but he always emphasized that the real work happened at the local level. "This isn't about following a script," he would explain. "It's about creating spaces for honest dialogue and real change." Community surveys began showing improved trust in law enforcement. Response times improved as better communication led to more accurate situation assessments. Officers reported feeling more confident in their interactions with the public, armed with better tools for de-escalation and understanding. The city council meeting where the program's first quarter results were presented drew a packed house. Crime rates had remained stable while civilian complaints had dropped significantly. Body camera footage showed more positive interactions between officers and citizens. The data supported what many already felt: real change was happening. As Part 4 drew to a close, Agent Richardson sat in his office at the Secret Service field office, reviewing the latest progress reports. On his desk lay invitations from police departments across the country, all eager to learn from this model of transformation. But what gave him the most satisfaction was the photo someone had sent him: the two officers who had detained him, now leading a community outreach session, genuine smiles on their faces as they engaged with local youth. The incident that could have deepened divisions had instead become a bridge, proving that even the most challenging moments could lead to positive change when approached with wisdom, compassion, and a commitment to understanding. As Agent Richardson prepared for another day of training, he knew that the real work was just beginning, but the foundation for lasting change had been firmly laid. 6 months after the coffee shop incident, Agent Richardson stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a packed auditorium of law enforcement leaders from across the nation. The small-town incident had sparked a movement that was now catching fire in departments nationwide. "Change doesn't come from policies alone," he stated, his voice carrying through the hushed room. "It comes from understanding, from walking in each other's shoes." Behind him, slides showed the remarkable statistics from his pilot program: a 60% reduction in civilian complaints, improved response times, and unprecedented levels of community trust. In the front row sat the two officers from the original incident, now invited as speakers themselves. Their journey from being symbols of the problem to becoming advocates for change had captured national attention. The younger officer had recently been promoted to lead his department's community engagement division, while his senior partner had turned down a retirement opportunity to continue working with the reform program. The White House had taken notice. Earlier that morning, Agent Richardson had attended a meeting with senior administration officials to discuss implementing these training methods at the federal level. The president's domestic policy team was drafting legislation that would provide funding for similar programs nationwide. Back in their hometown, the changes continued to ripple outward. The police department had become a model for others to follow, hosting observers from across the country. The training center, once a simple classroom space, now featured state-of-the-art simulation technology donated by tech companies impressed by the program's success. Local businesses reported improved relationships with law enforcement. The coffee shop where it all began had become something of a tourist attraction, with visitors coming to see where this national movement had started. The young barista who recorded the initial video had been offered a scholarship to study criminal justice, inspired by the transformation she'd witnessed. During a community feedback session, an elderly resident stood up, tears in her eyes. "For the first time in my life," she said, "I feel safe calling the police. Not afraid." Her words resonated through the room, capturing the essence of what the program had achieved. The media narrative had evolved too. National news magazines ran in-depth features about the program's success. Documentary filmmakers followed officers through their training, capturing the moments officers realized their own biases and learned to overcome them. Social media, which had initially exploded with anger over the incident, now shared stories of positive police-community interactions. Agent Richardson's inbox was flooded with requests for guidance from police chiefs nationwide. Rather than hoarding the success, he worked with his team to create open-source training materials that any department could implement. "This isn't about ownership," he explained during a CNN interview. "It's about transformation." The two officers involved in his detention had undergone their own profound journeys. The senior officer, speaking at a national police conference, shared how the incident had forced him to confront his own biases. "I thought I was one of the good ones," he admitted to his colleagues. "But being good isn't enough. We have to be better." His younger partner had become a sought-after speaker at police academies, sharing his experience with new recruits. "Your badge gives you authority," he would tell them. "But your actions earn you respect." His candid discussions about that day at the coffee shop and its aftermath helped future officers understand the weight of their responsibilities. The program's success had also sparked interest from international law enforcement agencies. Delegations from Europe, Asia, and Africa came to observe the training methods. Agent Richardson found himself consulting with police forces from London to Tokyo, adapting the program to different cultural contexts while maintaining its core principles. Technology played a crucial role in the program's expansion. Virtual reality scenarios were continuously updated based on real-world experiences, helping officers develop better instincts for de-escalation. Body camera footage, once seen primarily as a tool for accountability, became a valuable training resource, showing both successful and problematic interactions. Local schools began incorporating elements of the program into their curriculum, teaching students about their rights while also helping them understand the challenges law enforcement officers face. The goal was to build understanding from an early age, creating a foundation for better community relations in the future. As Part 5 drew to a close, Agent Richardson received news that would take the program to an even higher level. The United Nations had invited him to speak about the initiative as a model for global police reform. What began as a tense encounter in a coffee shop had evolved into a worldwide movement for positive change. In his office that evening, reviewing the latest batch of success stories from departments across the country, Agent Richardson reflected on how far they'd come. The photo of him in handcuffs, once a symbol of division, had been transformed into an emblem of hope and progress. It hung in the training center lobby, alongside pictures of graduating classes from the new program, diverse groups of officers committed to serving their communities with understanding and respect. The United Nations Conference Hall buzzed with anticipation as delegates from over 50 nations gathered to hear Agent Richardson speak. 1 year had passed since that fateful morning at the coffee shop, and the ripples of change had become waves, crossing oceans and borders. Every culture has its own challenges, Agent Richardson began, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. But the need for trust between law enforcement and communities is universal. Behind him, screens displayed success stories from departments worldwide that had adopted variations of his program. In the audience, police chiefs from Rio de Janeiro sat next to their counterparts from Sydney and Cape Town. Despite their different uniforms and languages, they shared a common purpose: learning how to transform their departments from within. The two officers from the original incident, now regular speakers at international events, watched from the side of the stage. Back home, their small city had become an unlikely global destination. International delegations regularly visited to observe the program firsthand. Local officers, once skeptical of foreign observers, now proudly demonstrated their transformed approach to policing. The coffee shop had even added international flags to its decor, representing all the countries that had sent representatives to learn from their experience. The young barista who recorded the original video had just completed her first semester studying criminal justice. Her class project, analyzing the global impact of the incident, had earned her national recognition. Sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest changes, she reflected during a panel discussion with international students. In London's Metropolitan Police Training Facility, officers watched recordings of Agent Richardson's sensitivity sessions. The British had adapted the program to their own unique context, incorporating lessons about class and cultural differences alongside racial awareness. "It's not about copying the American model," their training director explained. "It's about understanding the universal principles and applying them locally." Tokyo's police force had embraced the technology aspects of the program, developing innovative virtual reality scenarios that helped officers understand cultural nuances in their interactions with foreign residents. Their success had inspired similar initiatives across Asia. The senior officer who had detained Agent Richardson found himself in an unexpected role: international consultant. His honest accounts of personal transformation resonated with veteran officers worldwide. "We all start this job wanting to make a difference," he told a group in Berlin. "Sometimes we need a wake-up call to remember what that really means." Social media played a crucial role in spreading the message globally. The hashtag #PolicingWithDignity had gone viral, with officers and citizens from around the world sharing stories of positive change. The original coffee shop video, which had once sparked outrage, was now used in training sessions as far away as Australia and South Africa. Agent Richardson's inbox reflected the program's global reach. A message from a police chief in Brazil described how the training had helped reduce tensions in Rio's favelas. Another from Kenya detailed how community engagement initiatives had improved security in Nairobi's neighborhoods. Each success story added another layer to the program's evolving methodology. The United Nations had established a special task force to study the program's implementation in different cultural contexts. Their preliminary findings showed that while specific techniques needed to be adapted for local conditions, the core principles of respect, understanding, and community engagement remained universally effective. During a break in the conference, Agent Richardson met with a group of young officers from various countries. Their enthusiasm reminded him of his own early days in law enforcement. "Your generation has the power to redefine what policing means globally," he told them. Their eager questions and thoughtful responses gave him hope for the future. The younger officer from the coffee shop incident had developed a particular interest in international cooperation. He now led virtual training sessions with officers from around the world, sharing experiences and learning from their perspectives. "Every country has its own version of that coffee shop moment," he explained during one session. "The key is how we choose to respond to it." Technology continued to evolve to support the program's global expansion. Real-time translation apps facilitated direct communication between officers from different countries. A dedicated platform allowed departments worldwide to share best practices and discuss challenges. Virtual reality scenarios were now available in multiple languages, with culturally specific variations. The impact extended beyond law enforcement. Universities worldwide began incorporating elements of the program into their criminal justice curricula. International organizations studying conflict resolution looked to the program as a model for building trust between different groups. As Part 6 drew to a close, Agent Richardson stood at the conference center's window, watching delegates from around the world engage in animated discussions. The sight of police chiefs from different continents sharing stories and strategies filled him with quiet satisfaction. What had begun as a moment of injustice had transformed into a global movement for positive change. That evening, during a video call with the coffee shop team back home, he shared news of the international response. The barista, now interning with the police department while pursuing her studies, smiled. "Who would have thought," she said, "that one morning could change so many lives across the world?" The senior officer, who had once placed handcuffs on Agent Richardson, added his own reflection. "We're not just changing policies," he said. "We're changing hearts and minds, one department at a time, one country at a time." His words captured the essence of what their movement had become. A global catalyst for transformation in law enforcement. 18 months after the coffee shop incident, Agent Richardson faced a new challenge. The program's rapid global expansion had brought unexpected complications. Standing in the newly established International Training Center, he watched as instructors from 12 different countries debated how to address emerging issues while maintaining the program's core values. Success brings its own challenges, he observed to the gathered team. The center, funded by an international coalition of law enforcement agencies, had become the heart of the program's evolution. Today's meeting would determine how to tackle the next phase of their journey. The original coffee shop had transformed into a museum of sorts, its walls now covered with photographs and stories from around the world. The young barista, now approaching graduation, led tours for international visitors, explaining how a single morning had sparked a global movement. But she also understood that maintaining momentum required constant innovation. "We're seeing new types of situations that weren't covered in the original program," reported a police chief from Vancouver. Recent technological advances and changing social dynamics had created scenarios that required fresh approaches. The team had gathered to develop new training modules that would address these emerging challenges. The two officers from the initial incident, now senior trainers, presented their findings from recent global assessments. The younger officer had developed expertise in digital community engagement, recognizing how social media and online interactions were reshaping police-community relations. His former partner focused on helping veteran officers adapt to rapidly changing social expectations. One major initiative involved creating a global database of successful intervention strategies. "Every department faces unique challenges," Agent Richardson explained to a group of visiting officials. "But we've found that solutions developed in one part of the world often can be adapted to help others." The database allowed departments to learn from each other's experiences in real time. The program had begun addressing more complex scenarios. Virtual reality simulations now included situations involving mental health crises, cultural misunderstandings, and language barriers. Officers trained to recognize not just racial bias but a wider range of prejudices that could affect their judgment. In the technology wing of the center, developers worked on next-generation training tools. Artificial intelligence helped create more realistic scenarios, while advanced analytics tracked officers' progress through the program. But Agent Richardson always emphasized that technology was just a tool, the human element remained central to their mission. The senior officer who had detained Agent Richardson now led a specialized unit focused on helping departments recover from crisis situations. "What happened to us that morning could have destroyed careers and divided our community," he reflected during a training session. "Instead, it became a catalyst for healing. We want to help other departments find that same path." Community involvement had evolved as well. The program now included regular forums where citizens and officers could discuss emerging challenges in their neighborhoods. These discussions helped shape new training scenarios and policies, ensuring the program remained responsive to real-world needs. The Young Baristas Criminal Justice Project had expanded into a full-scale research initiative, studying how different communities responded to various aspects of the program. Her findings helped teams adapt training methods to specific cultural contexts while maintaining consistent core principles. International cooperation brought new perspectives. A technique developed by Japanese officers for de-escalating tensions in crowded urban areas was successfully adapted for use in European cities. Brazilian officers shared effective strategies for building trust in economically diverse communities. Each contribution enriched the program's overall effectiveness. Agent Richardson had learned to navigate the complex politics of international law enforcement reform. "Change doesn't happen in a vacuum," he explained during a global leadership summit. "We have to understand the political and social context in each location while staying true to our fundamental principles." The program's success had attracted attention from other sectors. Corporate leaders sought insights for improving security operations, while educational institutions incorporated elements into conflict resolution curricula. The principles of respect, understanding, and communication proved valuable across various fields. Technology played an increasingly important role in tracking the program's impact. A sophisticated data analytics system monitored key metrics across participating departments worldwide. The results helped identify areas needing attention and demonstrated the program's continued effectiveness to stakeholders. As Part 7 drew to a close, the team gathered for their annual review meeting. Representatives from 6 continents shared stories of transformation from their regions. The coffee shop incident, now documented in police academies worldwide, had evolved into something far bigger than anyone had imagined. The senior officer, gray-haired but energetic as ever, summed up their progress during the closing session. "We're not just training officers anymore," he said. "We're building bridges between communities, crossing cultural boundaries, and creating a new model of what law enforcement can be." Agent Richardson, watching the diverse group of leaders collaborate on future initiatives, reflected on how far they'd come. The program had grown beyond its original scope, adapting to new challenges while maintaining its essential focus on human dignity and understanding. As they planned for the future, he knew that the next chapter would bring new challenges, but the foundation they had built was strong enough to meet them. 2 years to the day after the coffee shop incident, Agent Richardson stood in the renovated community center where it had all begun. The building had been transformed into the Global Center for Police Community Relations, but today's gathering was more personal than professional. It was a reunion of everyone who had been part of that pivotal morning and the extraordinary changes that followed. The coffee shop barista, now a graduating senior with job offers from several law enforcement agencies, stood chatting with the 2 officers who had once handcuffed Agent Richardson. They were discussing the latest developments in community policing, their easy rapport a testament to how far things had come. "Sometimes I still watch that old video," the senior officer admitted, his voice soft with reflection. "Not because I'm proud of what happened, but because it reminds me of how much can change when we're willing to learn." His younger partner nodded, now a respected authority on police reform and community engagement. The original coffee shop had become a symbol of transformation. Its walls displayed a timeline of the movement's growth, from local incident to global phenomenon. But it remained a working café, serving as a regular meeting spot for officers and community members to share conversations and build understanding. Agent Richardson walked through the center's main hall, where interactive displays showcased success stories from around the world. A group of international police cadets was touring the facility, their different uniforms a colorful reminder of the program's global reach. They stopped to listen as he shared insights from his journey. "The hardest part of change isn't starting it," he told them, "it's sustaining it." The program had faced its share of challenges over the past 2 years, but each obstacle had ultimately strengthened their resolve and refined their methods. The results spoke for themselves, dramatically improved police-community relations in participating cities worldwide. The young barista, delivering her graduation speech via video link to the gathered crowd, captured the spirit of their achievement. "What we learned from that morning wasn't just about law enforcement," she said. "It was about the power of turning conflict into connection, fear into understanding." Technology had evolved to support their mission in ways they hadn't imagined. The latest training simulations incorporated real-world scenarios from different cultures, helping officers develop global awareness while maintaining local sensitivity. But the program's heart remained deeply human, focused on building genuine connections between police and the communities they served. The senior officer who had detained Agent Richardson now led the center's veteran outreach program. His personal journey from experienced officer to advocate for change resonated particularly well with long-serving police personnel. "Experience is valuable," he would tell them, "but being willing to learn new approaches is priceless." International adoption of the program had exceeded all expectations. Police departments from Beijing to Buenos Aires had implemented customized versions of the training, each adding their own cultural insights to the growing body of knowledge. The United Nations had officially recognized the program as a model for global law enforcement reform. The community center's cafe, where they now gathered for the reunion, buzzed with animated conversations in multiple languages. Police chiefs from various countries shared stories with local community leaders, while technology experts demonstrated the latest training innovations to interested observers. Agent Richardson found himself drawn to a quiet corner where photos from the past 2 years covered the walls. Images of training sessions, community meetings, and international conferences told the story of their journey. But his favorite was a recent photo of a graduating class from the police academy, young officers from diverse backgrounds, trained in the new methods from the start of their careers. The younger officer from the original incident, now married with a child on the way, shared his hopes for the future. "My kid will grow up in a world where this kind of policing isn't special, it's just how things are done," he said, his hand resting on his wife's shoulder. "That's what makes all of this worth it." As evening approached, Agent Richardson gathered everyone for a group photo. The original officers, the barista, community leaders, and representatives from police departments worldwide stood together, their smiles genuine. The photo would join others on the center's walls, marking another milestone in their ongoing journey. "We're not done yet," Agent Richardson reminded them during the closing ceremony. "There's still work to do, new challenges to face, more bridges to build." But looking at the diverse group before him, he felt confident about the future they were creating together. The senior officer, preparing to retire after 30 years of service, offered his own perspective. That morning at the coffee shop could have been just another incident, another statistic, he reflected. Instead, it became the catalyst for real change, not just in how we police, but in how we understand each other. As the sun set on their reunion, Agent Richardson watched the next generation of officers and community leaders deep in conversation, planning new initiatives and sharing ideas. The coffee shop incident had started as a moment of confrontation but had evolved into something far more powerful, a global movement for understanding and respect. The barista, now preparing to start her own career in law enforcement, summed it up best in her final remarks. "2 years ago, I recorded a video of what I thought was an injustice. Instead, I captured the beginning of a transformation. We didn't just change policies or procedures, we changed hearts and minds, one conversation at a time." As the gathering drew to a close, Agent Richardson knew that while this chapter of their story was ending, the impact of that morning would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and transforming communities for generations to come. The coffee shop incident had become more than a moment of change, it had become a blueprint for building a better, more understanding world.